Why don't we get going here? So welcome everybody. I'm Eric Rampel. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Redwood Logistics. And today we're going to be talking about Control Tower, but from a slightly different view. We're going to demystify it a little bit. We're going to talk about the hype, the reality, how they work, how you get them to work, and hope to have a fun session here. Towards the end, assuming we have time, we'll do a little bit of, we'll leave a little bit of room for Q&A. And in order to do that, I've been told there is a Q&A button in your Zoom meeting that you can go ahead and throw some questions in as you have them. And towards the end, we will do our best to get to all of your questions. So why don't we begin here? So today we're going to talk a bit about Control Tower, how it's defined, a little bit about visibility and what you get. It's a bit of an overused word. Control Tower can mean everything to everybody. It can mean a single pane of glass. It can mean total control. So we'll dig into what that means and what to look for. And then once we go kind of through defining it and how to get there, then we'll say, okay, how do we put it all together and what does it mean for your organization? And as I mentioned, hopefully towards the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So towards getting the definition of Control Tower. So Control Tower gives you this bird's eye view, right? It's obvious when you think about what it is, right? For example, if you're landing planes and you're in a control tower, you can see the whole runway. So think about that with your supply chain, but think about it from everything from your suppliers to manufacturers, logistics, warehousing, final mile and returns, right? And put all of that together. So you're not just looking at, in one particular segment of your supply chain, but you're looking at all of it together and how they interop, right? So if we take that a bit further, right, and then we think about it in terms of a business solution, there really isn't a standard Control Tower solution because it can mean so many things to so many organizations. So just like everything else in our industry, right, it has to work for your company. So the other part of this to remember is technology is only part of the solution. You don't just get a control tower, throw it on top of all your systems and, voila, you can see everything and be everything to everyone. It's a lot more of people and process and technology, and we'll get through that as we get through this presentations. So think about it not only as this tactical tool, right? You see this plane landing and what do you tell it to do, but think about not just reacting in real time, but to monitor strategic and tactical business objectives is what's happening in the direction of what my organization wants to see happen in the long term with my supply chain. And can we get value from implementing it properly, right? So when you're looking at a control tower, you think about what it touches everything. So if we can implement it everything and be mindful of what it takes to connect all of that data, all of those systems in an end-to-end solution, and as well as to what degree you want to implement it, that'll certainly dictate the success or failure of this type of project. And speaking of a project like that, it's really important to think about this as an 80-20. Always seek, what 20% effort can give me 80% of my value, or what 20% of features can give me 80% of what I'm looking for when I'm driving supply chain efficiency and digitization, as well as showing that ROI to the CFO, because you can spend 100% of the money very easily, and that doesn't make anyone happy within a company. So why the hype, right? Why is Control Tower this hype thing? And we'll get to what that means and hype cycle a bit here later. But, end-to-end visibility is huge, right? Visibility in general is huge. Where's my freight? Where is my product? Where does it sit in my warehouse? Where is it over the road? Where is the raw materials from my suppliers? All of that matters, right? So when something is wrong, Control Tower can give you the ability to run playbooks in response to these disruptions. And not just within your organization, but across your systems, across your partners, right? And have KPIs for how they're performing. And then you take those KPIs and then you say, can I get more insight, right? Can this tie into my data warehouse strategy? And can I leverage information of what's going on within my supply chain towards predictive analytics and maybe even prescriptive analytics, right? Where on that evolutionary journey of data, predictive says, hey, what might happen based on this scenario? Prescriptive is how can I make a certain scenario happen based on the data that I'm seeing? And of course, the huge one is, can I orchestrate? Can I orchestrate automated supply chain actions in response to these types of supply chain events, which could be huge, right? You have good playbooks to run and good people to do it. And obviously those benefits can be, reduces of shortages and stockouts, right? Reducing expedited costs. I don't want to have to spend, the most amount of money on logistics when, my data shows I can do otherwise, or increase inventory turns, right? How quickly can I get that product into and out of my warehouse so that I know I'm ordering the right amount? Better on-time pickup and performance, right? Faster mean time to issue resolution. Can I measure how people are performing in response to things? And the reason we're saying all of these things is because what a control tower can do when implemented properly is it can stitch so many systems and so many data points together so that you can measure things, because you can't improve what you don't measure, which then leads to more accurate forecasting. And a multi-everything data warehouse is obviously a huge part of that, where you have data not just from your supply chain partners, but internal as well as other systems. And then as this thing evolves, right, and as technology evolves, especially within our industry, machine learning models towards a feedback loop, meaning what actions do I take? Do those actions result in better performance within my supply chain? And can that loop then teach my models to do better things as it suggests how to deal with issues within that control tower? So at a super high level, right, those are, some of the ways in which you can leverage it and some of the benefits, but let's dig in a little bit deeper towards what this visibility really means and how to get there. So in terms of getting there, right? So we happen to, look at everything as a build versus buy. We built a lot of technology at Redwood. We bought a lot more technology at Redwood. And so when you think about something like Control Tower, you think about that build complexity, right? It's very high. You saw that diagram. You're touching a whole bunch of different systems and trading partners, and that's just internally before we even get towards inviting outside partners to participate in a Control Tower. Then you go a little bit further and say, okay, well, what is this going to cost, right? So the capital investment is high. And then that ongoing operational investment is high as well, because people need to maintain it, which then takes me to my last point around the product evolution, right? Are you building something for your organization in terms of a control tower that you think, is really beneficial and helps? And then once you finally get that approved, and let's say that your CFO, signs off on this, it's not just that budget, but then it's the budget afterwards of run and maintain, right? So I have to maintain this thing, I have to add features. So, from our point of view, it's a lot better to buy a control tower, because you get not only the, your ability to put your flavor on it when you implement it, but you get a product that evolves through a SaaS offering, right? So we work with Oracle, and we kind of like all these products out there. But it's something that if you're looking at this, you really, really, really want to make a sharp decision in terms of, do I build or do I buy? And for something like a control tower, we highly recommend that buy. And then what do you get, right? What is the destination, right, of this control tower, right? So we say it's this visibility, it's this eye in the sky, but it's a whole lot more than that. So what you're really looking at, and it starts with the first layer of visibility, right, where you have this visibility across everything from planning and sourcing and, looking at demand and order management, logistics, fulfillment, final mile. You can see it all because all of those data points are funneling into your control tower so that you can, take advantage of all that information, which then leads to decision support, right? So you can now take advantage of all that end-to-end visibility and make better operational decisions, right? And then that leads to good tactical choices as well, which then roll up to insight and strategy, right? So can we really get strategic with this data and this information? So can we leverage, as we mentioned earlier, advanced forecasting and analytics to drive better decision-making, so that all of a sudden your control tower now just doesn't give you the quote unquote end-to-end visibility that everyone's so excited about, but it offers up almost a cockpit or a place for an individual to say, I see what's in front of me, as well as it's giving me good choices of what to do next. And here's how it is impacting my overall organization strategy towards KPIs or metrics that we're trying to hit this year or this quarter or whatever is important to your organization. So that's fun, right? But getting there, you have to deal with a lot, and you have to deal with supply chain integration. And in order to do that, right, you have to think about it in terms of multiple tiers, because all of this data that has to go into control tower has to get funneled from a myriad of places and get connected into one thing that your control tower systems can take advantage of. So can your control tower get to, what are called experience APIs? A lot of times these are publicly facing, or these are built for internal developers, or sometimes even external developers, where you can do things like, get orders, or get shipments in transit, or, edit a carrier on a load, or, look at the demand data around a specific SKU, right? So all of that stuff available via API to come back into your control tower is critical. From there, once you have that data, or you're trying to send data back into the operational systems, which we'll get to in a second, you need processes and workflows, meaning the control tower and how it works is going to send information into your integration platform, to which point you have to kind of orchestrate how that data gets down to the system that it needs to live in, right? So these are the lifeblood of the enterprise. These processes are, where data transformations live, and where you make data stronger and better, and all that information now is, now compatible with the system that it needs to go to next. which then leads to data synchronization, right? So some call this a digital twin or in-memory objects, but this is where is bill of lading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Where is purchase order 7, 8, 9, 10? Where are these objects? Where do they live? How do I get to them and guarantee that data stays synchronized, so that when it's time to choreograph it, it becomes easy. It's just a function that people don't have to think about because it works. Your supply chain integration platform does the work. And then obviously the bottom tier, which is your system APIs and connectors. All of this stuff has to connect to everything in your enterprise, be it your data systems, be it your applications, your ERP, your WMSs. These are connectors to the enterprise of your system, right? This is where everything lives. So if we take that a bit further and you look at, what type of things live in your data ecosystem, these are your enterprise systems. These are apps that might be available as a service that you want to use to automate and get more value out of your traditional systems, right? This is data. This is where the data lives within your enterprise. This is your data warehouse. This is your operational data store. All of this kind of stuff really matters because it's where the data lives, and this is what is critical in order to send good data to the control tower. You've got things like your trading partners and all your B2B commerce around EDI and that connectivity layer, which is a bit more traditional but critical, especially in our industry when you're talking about control tower. And then obviously the whole onslaught of IoT data, from temperature sensors to if you have assets or machinery, right? Can all of that data look towards preventing any issues or predicting them? For example, is a conveyor belt running improperly? Do I have temperature issues on a refrigerated unit? All of that information can stream in and then trigger alerts through a solid analytics engine to then send all that information back up to the control tower. So continuing a little bit further and putting our control tower system back together, now here's what it looks like once you have it, right? So this comes from a Deloitte study on supply chain on the left, but what you're seeing is that it's not just within your own company, right, which is a majority of it, but there's also external connectivity. So you have end-to-end visibility up top in blue, right, in the control area, which is what you get in your control tower, to which your planning and then your execution live immediately below it. So then you look at your demand planning. How do you integrate with your financial package? How do you, look at, various scenarios to your manufacturing and your demand resource planning, your S&OP, all of these different types of planning scenarios, as well as pulling demand data that comes from the outside world. We mentioned IoT, but that IoT could also be what's going on in social media or news events, things that may impact your organization, which could halt operations. That if you could see that in a control tower would be really helpful. And if you had playbooks to deal with it, right, even more helpful. And then that all goes down to that execution layer. But what we're trying to express here with all of this isn't that control tower now all of a sudden gives you all this information, but that control tower is only powerful and only valuable when all of these lines are connected. So you've got, all of these individual dots, right, that are these lines that we're showing here, many of which have 5, 10, maybe hundreds of different methods or APIs associated with them. Maybe you've got hundreds of different 3PLs or suppliers you work with that have, your 200 series for truckload, your 100 for parcel, various EDI. You've got, just for the control tower itself down to execute. We talked about those experience APIs. That could be 10, 20, 50, different API methods. So all of this means that you really have to think about this, what we sometimes call the spaghetti monster of connectivity, and have a really solid strategy on how to deal with it. In fact, it's the reason that we have built Redwood Connect, which lets us design what happens inside in each of these dots, right? So I can say, oh, okay, when I get a order that goes into a delivered status from my TMS, I want to grab that data, I want to cleanse it, I want to transform it, I want to send a WM notice, then have that ASN trigger actions in my warehouse management partner, as well as, figure out what's going on with my demand system and did it replenish according to what I expected, or when they unloaded it was something missing, right? So all of these types of scenarios are very doable when you have a good supply chain integration platform like Redwood Connect that allows you to orchestrate and choreograph all of this stuff. In fact, at Redwood, we do this, right? So in our history, and since being acquired, we now look at buying other organizations. So, we do mergers and acquisitions, and we buy other companies and we buy other systems. So we can't be on a single platform at Redwood, just like, most organizations don't have one system to rule them all. Otherwise, they're likely just getting started and about to grow, because there really isn't a system out there that does everything for everyone. So partners, carriers, systems, they're all on different systems, and we leverage Redwood Connect to tie it together for ourselves. So if we go a little bit further now and we bring this back down to earth and we want to filter some of the signals through the noise. So what we're saying here is how can we get, a true kind of understanding of what is hype and what is reality. So this is from a great article excuse me, that was generated, and I highly recommend that you take a look at the citation down below. But there were about 10 topics that talked about the hype, right? And so now let's bring those into the reality. So a lot of the hype is you have total visibility and control, right? And it's end to end, right? But visibility is just the start, as we mentioned, right? A true control tower empowers action. When you can see something and you can't take action on it, it's almost more frustrating than not knowing that it happened in the first place. Then you go to, can we react to these events in real time? Well, yeah, that's good, but a single event response is good, but what about upstream and downstream? Let's say that something in transit is delayed. What does that do to the carrier that's gonna maybe pick up a return? Or do I have a conveyor system that is gonna do a plant shutdown because its product runs 24/7, and that scenario is gonna cause a whole domino effect of issues. If you look at number 3, you get this control of your supply chain. But what about more than the supply chain? What about talking to customers? What about, letting finance know what are the implications of this issue? So when you think about that, and when you think about, what control means, control doesn't just mean fixing an issue. Control means notifying others so that they can react as well and, hopefully prevent frustration. Looking at number 4, when you have an issue, just press a button, right? Super simple. When you have this kind of control tower, just press the button for that plane to land. Well, humans are still very, very smart in spite of what's going on with machine learning and AI. And so organizations should really tee up multiple scenarios for humans, for people, right? To take a look at what the scenarios are and what the possible outcome can be, and let them make qualified decisions, right? These are supply chain experts. Let them figure it out. Tee them up with the good information, tee them up with a few good scenarios, but let people figure it out, because as we know in this industry, every day presents a new challenge that we haven't seen before. Going to number 5, real-time everything is the future. So, yes, data needs to be real-time, but what do you do with that data? If we have thousands of events coming from thousands of devices and sensors and systems and trading partners all going into control tower that's just shooting dings and red lights at people, it's going to overwhelm them and it's going to create a failed solution. Rather, what you want to do is say, if we're getting a whole bunch of issues all at once, is there a way that we can aggregate that information? Can we actually make it more meaningful and take all that information to turn it into one problem or just a few things that someone has to deal with by looking at it in bulk rather than one at a time? Which kind of comes to number 6 of aggregate all the data and see everything. But we have to be mindful, and going back to that slide about what happens with all of those lines in between systems, dirty data is everywhere, and it's very much in your organization. We have yet to see in the hundreds of customers that we've implemented where there isn't some sort of data that needs to be cleaned or looked up, or wrong location codes or bad NMFC data. So dirty data is everywhere, and it's just the reality. So be prepared to clean it. Be prepared to clean it from the outside world when it's coming in. For example, this article mentioned rail car updates, right? There's so many places where bad data comes flying at you, and having a way to clean that data in real time as it streams in will make everyone's life much, much easier. And number 7, right? See everything perfectly right out of the box when you buy it. So hopefully this, presentation here has shown us a bit of nothing really works out of the box. If it does, I think everyone would have it. But what's probably more important is what to do with this information once it is hooked up, right? And back to the art of storytelling with data. So think about when you get your control tower in, and now you have all this data coming in, how are you going to present it? When do you use charts and graphs? When do you use maps? When do you use KPIs and OKRs? When do you ignore data because it's just noise and there's no signal in that noise? So, make sure that the person or people that are working on your control tower really are good at business storytelling without too much bias, right? Because you don't want to hide problems either, but have a good way to present data up, just as if you're presenting data from any part of your business and telling a story with it. Number 8, right? Huge hype, put a manager in the control tower and done, right? We like to think you get those big headsets in the control tower and you know, you look at the glass at the runway and all of a sudden you can see everything. That's not really true. And it doesn't really mean to put, you know, multiple people in there, but what it really means is to be collaborative. So think about collaboration within your control tower, not just being people within your organization, but inviting suppliers and carriers and customers with the right permissions, of course, but to be in there and to see what's going on and problem solve together. Sometimes it's as simple as chatting together. Sometimes it can be looking at scenarios together. Other times it can be delegating issues that are clearly partner or vendor related out to them and measuring them with scorecards on how quickly they can correct issues that the control tower finds. But again, those are different business rules that are, you know, somewhat specific to every company. So it's important to think, what can control tower do for me when my people are using it, but also when our partners are using it as well at the same time. And the results there can be staggering. Number 9, right? I can finally see everything. Yes, and as we've mentioned a few times earlier in this presentation, what about seeing what will happen, not just what did happen, right? So looking backwards is cool and very needed, but predictive and prescriptive analytics are game changers. So, you know, what will happen? How can I do something to make something happen? This is where things are, and moving towards that, you know, at a very rapid pace. And number 10, probably my favorite, right? The robot overlords have it under control, right? Just get the control tower and get Rosie the robot in there. But that's, you know, that's an evolution, right? Machine learning and AI are very, very powerful. But every time you introduce a new variable to these types of algorithms, it becomes exponentially more complex to solve that problem, which means more compute power, which means more challenges. So it is happening, right? But if you think about, you know, how machine learning works without getting technical, it sees things over and over and over, and then it's trained yes or no, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And over time, it can start suggesting yes, no, once it sees things. Within our world, and especially within a control tower, when you have so many systems and so many variables, it's really a little bit tougher there to leverage this type of power. So it's happening, but it's very evolutionary, not an overnight revolution. And so, you know, to kind of bring this all together, and we'll have some time for Q&A here in a bit, if we think about the evolution of hype, right? And on the left, most of you have seen, you know, Gartner hype cycles, and here's one pretty recent as of August 2020 around supply chain strategy for 2020. And on the left, you'll see supply chain control towers highlighted in yellow. What's really interesting is control tower in the past has been past the innovation trigger, past the peak of inflated expectations, through the trough of disillusionment and into the slope of enlightenment, almost in the plateau of productivity, meaning it's ready for everybody. But with the new technology coming in around machine learning and predictive and how systems can tie together and how you can stitch all of this stuff together, control tower just got exponentially more complex because you're looking at collaborative, internal, external, you know, different ways to, you know, kind of bring what was just visibility in the sky to actions from data. And that's a different thing, right? That's a much more powerful thing. So according to Gartner, we're looking at about 5 to 10 years out until this plateaus, but it's certainly going to follow people's digital strategy around, you know, bringing their organization to become API-led and, you know, bringing in the connectivity that we were showing earlier. So, you know, there has been a lot of overhyped, right? Flying cars, digital supply chain bots that do all the work for you, right? Those aren't quite here yet. But mature technology really, really does exist, which should very much be 100% part of your supply chain strategy. You know, a single solution where you plug it in, you know, I can't stress that enough. That's hype. Even with a TMS or WMS, you don't just plug it in. You have to connect it to your organization. You have to orchestrate and curate how it interacts with your existing systems, from your ERP and your order management system to your, you know, back-end financial platform and trading partners. So all of that work needs to happen. And, you know, we're excited because we do that work for our customers all the time. And Control Tower, you know, becomes a natural evolution of that effort. You know, so technologies that have been and will be the pillars of Control Tower should still be considered great ROI, you know, places. So, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, back to the TMS, right, that feeds Control Tower. If you're thinking about WMS, that feeds Control Tower. If you're thinking about an ERP upgrade, that feeds Control Tower. And certainly if you're thinking about a cloud data warehouse, that feeds Control Tower. With Redwood Connect, what we do with all of that data is we work with our customers, especially on the TMS side, but, you know, it really works with any system, to take all of that data that the TMS creates, and we pump it into data warehouses of their choice, so that they now have their data in a data warehouse that has the rest of their information. So it's not our data warehouse, it's our customers. And that becomes the pillar, right? The foundation for Control Tower, so it can start making decisions and start helping you become predictive rather than just being reactionary and visibility only. And so with that right integration strategy, a Control Tower that helps your business take that quantum leap forward is very, very possible and actually quite fun. So, we know most of you are at home right now, and we thank you for coming here. We've got some time for questions now and, to work with the audience. So I'll go ahead and open up the Q&A section if anyone has any, and feel free to use that, and we'll give it a couple of minutes. And if not, we appreciate your time. All right, well, we'll give it another minute here, but if anyone has any other questions, we'll wait here for a minute. Otherwise, we thank you and appreciate your time for joining us on this webinar. Oh, here we go. So a question here, how have your most successful customers organized internally to tackle the data layer piece of the puzzle? That's a great question. So it's usually in two phases. The first phase is to be able to get the data out. So a lot of times data lives in let's just go with a TMS. A lot of times data lives in a TMS, and it's either difficult to get out of the system, or it's in a manner that is hard to work with. For example, it might just be a ton of XML and not access to a database. So what we first do is we say, can we get that data out and into a normalized database? So we take their information and then we say, okay, Redwood Connect can do what's called ETL, and it does in-flight ETL. So as the data is streaming, we then send it to a destination of their choice, whether it is their own data warehouse. We happen to like Snowflake a lot, and we suggest that to our customers so that they have a place that the data can live and is always accessible. And that's really just on the data side. On the real-time side of the business, what we do is we say, every time there's a message or an event, how can we actually get that data flowing from system to system? So that's where we use Connect to do event-based data movement. So let's say that the order management system has a new order. That order will then go into Redwood Connect. Redwood Connect will understand that this is going perhaps to OTM for transportation planning. We'll make it match the standards that it needs to have there, and same thing back and forth. So we're always pumping data in real time between enterprise systems. And then when they want that data to eventually go into a data warehouse, that's just us literally dragging a line to go to files that they can pick up in S3 or Azure, or go to Snowflake, or even go to their own database of choice. So it's a combination of data at rest and data in motion strategy that we deliver for them. We have another one here around what are the biggest challenges with implementing a control tower, and how difficult is it getting all the players and partners on board? So it's tough, right? I would say that I can talk to the technology side of this quite easily, which is you need to have, the connectivity strategy between all of your systems mapped out, have transformations between those systems, plus a place to ingest all of it, right? So from a technical side, it's a lot of work, but it's very, very doable. I would argue that, when you mentioned, your question is the difficult part is getting players and partners on board, and that's absolutely true, right? Think about just onboarding EDI and getting them to test it on the other side. That's always a challenge. So a lot of it has to do with, do you have the momentum to get your trading partners to participate? Can they log in? Often giving them an easier way to do it works. So what we like to do is have a standardized data model and work with the most common formats that we can and offer that to our customers' customers. So it's easier for them to integrate, whether it's EDI or XML or JSON. We support everything. But at some point, this becomes having sway over your partners to get involved. But the promise, and this is where it can get interesting, the promise of long-term collaboration and letting them log into portals, once you have a good portal for them to log into and you simplify what they need to do, we've had a lot of success with that over the years, which is, here's a simple login. You only have 4 or 5 things on the screen that you can actually do. And that's what we expect out of you as a partner in keeping it simple. And evolve from there. If you overwhelm them and, instead of giving them an iPhone, you put them inside of the space shuttle, right? We don't want to create that kind of overwhelm. We want them to have a really simple way to just look at what's being asked of them, and, they get to participate both from a data integration perspective as well as people integrating sometimes just through portals. Another good question is, where do you start? Do you have a playbook for how you evolve to a control tower? So, I would say that there's some playbooks, but, perhaps the easier side of this is, do you have a playbook around, data connectivity within your organization? And you don't have to start with control tower. If you start with, do I have a TMS and an ERP and a demand planning system and a financial system, and can I get those to work? And then can I tie those in where I'm also sending data to a data warehouse? Now you have the foundation, and back to the 80-20 earlier, we can show that, to whoever the financial stakeholder is, hey, normally when you get a control tower, you have to think about all of this connectivity, but we connected all of our systems because we get more value out of it. We get higher ROI when the systems are connected because it becomes all real time. And then from there, it becomes a bit easier to then say, now we can put a control tower on top. Whereas before, we're doing connectivity for the sake of control tower and you don't know if it's going to work. Now it buys you some time to connect all of your systems and then put control tower on top of it once the connectivity is there and in good working shape. So it seems like that's it for questions. I'll give it another minute or two if there's any more. Yeah, we'll give it just a second here. Otherwise, that'll be it. Well, cool. Well, thank you very much. Very much appreciate your time here on a Monday. And I hope everyone is staying safe out there, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much.